for the hardest-hitting show in talk radio. The true progressive voice since 2012. This is Southpaws.
And welcome to Southpaws on the Pacifica Radio Network. We are the leaders of the revolution. I am Darren Gibson.
I am Jack Prince.
And we've got a lot of things to discuss today, including some updates to some stories we've been telling you about. We're going to be on the road again coming up in May. We'll give you some details about that. Ottawa Impact, the continuing saga of the Ottawa County, Michigan Board of Commissioners. Holy moly, they're turning on each other like rabid dogs. A librarian in Lapeer County, Michigan might be facing criminal charges for an LGBTQ book. We've talked about that on last week's show. We have an update to that story. Right to work is going bye-bye in Michigan, and welcome back, prevailing wage. We are all for it. We'll give you all the good details on that story. Plus, a Hammer Time segment this week that I can't believe. I mean, are we back in the 1930s and 40s with Nazis wanting to down Jewish people?
Yeah, the short answer, yes.
Yeah. Well, we'll get to that in just a moment. Before we get to today's topics, a couple of reminders. You can follow us on social media by going to facebook.com/Southpaws Radio Show. You can follow us on Twitter at Southpaws Radio. You can follow us on Tumblr at southpawsradioshow.tumblr.com. You can follow us on YouTube or on Mastodon by doing a search for Southpaws Radio. And you can become a patron of the show by going to patreon.com/Southpaws Radio. You can listen to the show anytime at Apple Podcasts, Spreaker, Stitcher, Google Podcasts, Podcast Addict, Podvine, and Pandora by doing a search for Southpaws. And once you found our logo, you found us. We send links to our weekly episodes to our Facebook, Twitter, Tumblr, YouTube, and Mastodon accounts. You can listen to us on Global Community Radio Channel 1 every Saturday night at 11 Eastern. And you can listen to us on great Pacifica stations, including KCEI in Taos, New Mexico, KZGM in Kabul, Missouri, and KEPJ in San Antonio, Texas. So be sure to listen to us on your local Pacifica station. And if they're not carrying our show, please call them up and ask them very politely to do so. We would greatly appreciate it. Speaking of the show, Jack, you have a couple of updates to some things. First off, we had mentioned over the last couple of weeks that our good friend Jeff Smith at Grand Rapids Institute for Information Democracy has published a new book.
Yes, he has.
And you were at the party that launched the book. So why don't you give us some details?
Yeah, Darren, be glad to. The book is called A People's History of Grand Rapids. And for all progressives, I'm sure you recognize that moniker as the initial author, Howard Zinn, wrote the People's History of the United States. And it was presented to Jeff years ago. Hey, why don't you write one about Grand Rapids? And so all these many years later, I think it took him over 10 years to write this book.
Oh, wow.
It is absolutely incredible. It portrays a rich progressive history in this normally thought of progressive bastion called Grand Rapids. The Bland Rapids nickname fits politically because it doesn't seem to have a progressive backbone, but it has a tremendous backbone. I can't touch on just the depth of it. I highly recommend it. I have a copy for you, Darren, that will belong to the Southpaw Library forever. And I can't praise his effort enough to get this out. You read it, and it's just so researched that you wonder where he finds time. A man that works full-time and is constantly protesting progressively for people. Today, as a matter of fact, he's down in Lansing protesting for driver's licenses for people that have been blocked out. I don't know all the details. He sent me a message that he was laughed at by our friend Phil Skaggs, the Democratic establishment king.
Well, as we mentioned,
made fun of.
Skag is a good name for him because that's what he is. He's Skaggy. Douchebag of the Week winner in previous episodes.
Yeah, oh, yeah. Yeah, but one last brief little picture of the festivities when the book was signed, the books were signed, I should say. People told stories going back decades. One story was absolutely riveting, and I just want to share it. I'll take a minute. Back when they were snatching people in Nicaragua off the streets in South America, and the government, in Colombia, many of the countries down there with authoritarian leadership were just snatching progressives off the street, grabbing them and going. So Jeff and 3 or 4 other people, this is before I had actually even moved to Grand Rapids, decided they were going to go out into the city, and they'd go to focal places and have a person that they knew waiting there, that they were going to run out with black hoods on, if you can believe this, grab them, throw them into a van, and people were startled just watching this. It took place all over Grand Rapids. They even grabbed a man in a wheelchair. And then, while the city was wondering what the blank was going on, they put a drama production on indicating that this is what people in South America are experiencing daily. Just those kinds of historical incidents. And then it wasn't just limited to Jeff's actions. It goes all the way back to when Grand Rapids was colonized and the attempts to bring democracy into the city. Highly recommend it. My hat is off to Jeff and his great accomplishment.
Yes, and you can pick up that book at Schuler Books, I believe. And
yes, you can.
And Jeff is also going to have some events coming up at Schuler Books, and I believe Books and Mortar. I think he was looking at some other local bookstores in the area as well.
Yeah, I just can't put into proportion what kind of treasure his work has been for the city. 2 weeks ago, he invited me out to a protest against a very egregious tenant treatment at an apartment house in Grand Rapids. A day later, all the people that came out and complained about the leaky pipes and black mold, et cetera, after the protest was over, all those people received notices that their leases weren't going to be renewed. So Jeff jumps back in. Now there's another protest, fighting for people's rights. What a life. What a testament to progressive leadership. And don't get me going. You know what I think of Jeff and this work.
Yeah. And
now it's capsulized in this book. I urge people to go to Schuler's and grab one.
Wow. Protest against a slumlord and lose your house. Right there should be douchebag of the week.
No kidding.
Unbelievable. Yeah, we'll dig into that a little bit more in a future episode.
Yeah, we can get some more research into that.
And then we're going to be on the road again. Saturday, May 20th, we will be at Booksellers in their public room in Mason, Michigan, doing a live show.
Yes, we will.
And you've kind of taken the lead on this one, so I'll let you take over again.
It has a warm spot in my heart, the city of Mason, because I was raised there. But there's no space in my heart for the racist past that I've uncovered and another person who's on the city council has uncovered. It's epitomized right now by the board's refusal to have a day of commemoration for Malcolm X. Malcolm X is probably, without doubt, the greatest black orator in American history, and superseding Martin Luther King. That's not hyperbole. His example of overcoming racism and fighting for justice and racial equality is unmatched. And he is a globally famous man. And yet the city of Mason, and imagine, Darren, in this atmosphere where black history is such an issue, such a focal point of discussion, that they dare, without discussion, summarily vote down a proposal by the woman we're going to be interviewing, whose name is Rita Vogel, that they have the temerity to do that in this atmosphere in milieu. It's incredible. Many people have gone to the board meetings, the council meetings since, decrying that decision, dismayed that they would do such a thing. And we're going to step right into that atmosphere. By invitation only, we're going to have, we've had commitment from some education leaders from the State Board of Education. We have a teacher who was forced to resign because she was trying to teach Black history there in Mason. We have a number of Black leaders speaking as well at this interview / media day and press conference. So, Darren, I am thrilled that you're going to be there. We'll travel together, get down early, set this up, and then it will be filmed. It's already going to be covered by the Grid magazine. Jerry J will be there, and I think it's going to be quite a statement. I've been contacted by some people that have brought history back into my vision about the city. Shockingly, it is a city that is on the list of the most racist cities in the Midwest in a book called Sundowner Town. In that book and in other references, it's discovered they had a lynching right there in Mason where the farmers pulled a Black Civil War veteran out of prison, hung him in the town square. Mason is the town where they shipped, I didn't want to say bust, Black defendants from Detroit after and during the 1967 riots. They've had episodes of Blacks being confronted in athletic contests. Recently, a watermelon put on a desk of a Black worker in the area. And this is all contemporarily speaking. Malcolm left Mason in 1941. I think it's so poignant. And in conclusion here, I don't want to go on and on. I can't wait for this interview. But in conclusion, I think this is a golden opportunity to really demonstrate what happens when you have a lack of full-fledged, thorough Black history instead of rumors and little traditional remarks and thoughts. When you go and you really dig into the history of a locale and when you dig into the history of this family and so forth, that's the detail that the white establishment makes sure they want to bleach out. And we're in a battle right now for the truth. And this interview, I think, is going to aid us in the fight against those that want to shut down all truth about Black history. So, Darren, I think you're going to be part of it.
Yes, and again, we will have more details as that event comes forward. Again, that's going to be on Saturday, May 20th at 1 p.m. by invitation only in Mason, Michigan at Booksellers. So we'll have all the details for that coming up in future episodes. But right now, Jack, we have a new segment on this show. Let's go ahead with the music. And now, Procter and Ramble present As Ottawa County Turns. Brought to you by Vomit Cleanser. If it doesn't get your pans clean, then nothing will. Vomit Cleanser instead of Comet Cleanser. Yes, here we go, folks. Here's the latest update on what's happening in Ottawa County, Michigan with the Ottawa Impact Commissioners. This is Luke Steyer writing for Wood Television. This is dated March 21st out of Olive Township. I wish somebody would stick an olive in Joe Moss's nose. The growing divide on the Ottawa County Board of Commissioners was again cleared Tuesday as a commissioner who recently left the Ottawa Impact majority dared the board chair to use his gavel. Did you see the video of this?
No, I haven't.
Oh, you have to. This is amazing stuff. The argument happened as commissioners battled over whether board meetings should include an agenda item for commissioners to discuss any topics. Doug Zylstra, the lone Democrat on the board, said, quote, "Sometimes I feel like we don't also have the chance to comment and talk among ourselves," end of quote.
Yeah,
he made a motion during Tuesday's Board Rules Committee meeting that a commissioner comments agenda item be required at regular board meetings, which, by the way, most counties and most boards do this.
Yeah.
County board meetings in January and February had included an agenda item at the end of the meeting titled General Information, Comments, and Meetings Attended. That item agenda was left off the most recent board meeting on March 14th. Board Chair Joe Moss spoke against the motion. He said, quote, "I'm not interested at this point in what you might call commissioner comments or commissioner free-for-all at the end of the meetings. We've seen where this kind of an open-ended discussion is best handled outside the boardroom," end of quote. In other words, no accountability, violating the Open Meetings Act, Whatever
No
you want to call it.
transparency.
No transparency. None. Moss suggests...
Ottawa County.
Yep.
Damn.
Yep.
What a conservative Confederate capital in Michigan.
Just a
whole
stone's
damn
throw
county.
from your house.
Yeah, really, I'm going to throw stones.
I hope you hit them. Moss suggested that if commissioners want to discuss something during a meeting, the topic should be added to the agenda. Commissioner Jacob Bonnema, who recently left the conservative group Ottawa Impact that Moss co-founded, disagreed with keeping comments to agenda items only. Bonnema said, quote, "I really protest this," end of quote. Moss interrupted Bonnema, saying he was not recognized, and picked up the gavel. He kept saying, "You're out of order. You're not recognized. You're out of order," to Bonnema. So Bonnema struck back with this quote, "Hit the gavel," which Moss did, and Moss responded, quote, "Commissioner Bonnema, you are out of order. Please stop," end of quote. Vice Chair Sylvia Rodea, who co-founded Ottawa Impact with Moss, said she was concerned that a commissioner comment section could catch some commissioners off guard. Oh, ain't that too bad that they get held accountable for what they do?
That's code for not having a prepared cover over line of BS.
Yep.
It's called extemporaneous confrontation.
Rodea said, quote, "It's only fair to all commissioners to know the topics that are going to be talked about when they go to a meeting and to not be surprised by things added at the very end," end of quote. Oh, you mean like they did at their first meeting?
Well, they took over, yeah.
Unbelievable. Hypocritical, self-righteous. That is what she is. Oh, my God. I'd love to get in her face. You'd have to bail me out of jail, Jack. I guarantee it. Guarantee it.
I know. You have the very accurate lead in there with as the world turns. It turns your stomach, and no pun intended. It's sickening. This kind of affront to democracy, this hysteria, this conservative mantra, dialogue. It's just sickening. I don't care if it's in Ottawa County or it's down in Florida, where today or yesterday Republicans are trying a bill or proposing a bill to prevent children from learning about menstruation in elementary school, when you and I both know many young girls experience menstruation. We're talking about dark age kind of crap.
Yeah. Let me continue the story real quickly here. Rodea took that stance despite making multiple surprise motions during the board's first meeting of the year. It was Rodea who added agenda items during the January 3rd meeting to replace the county commissioner with John Gibbs and change the county motto to "Where Freedom Rings." No, it's more like "Where Fascism Lives," folks.
Yeah, no, where fascism stinks.
She also supported added motions to close the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Department and appoint a new public health officer, which, as we mentioned on last week's show, they're getting sued over. And I was telling a friend of mine this morning, the case is being heard in Muskegon County, which is highly Democratic. And I got a feeling that the Ottawa County Board is going to find out the hard way.
I hope so.
Zylstra's motion to permanently add the commissioner comment section failed 6-3, with all 6 Ottawa Impact-backed commissioners voting against it. Zylstra and Bonnema were joined by Rebecca Current in dissent. Bonnema released this statement on Wednesday. Here's how it reads. Quote, "Commissioner Zylstra made a motion to have the administrator's update and commissioners' questions placed on our agendas as standing items, which is a reasonable and prudent request and a model that is utilized by nearly every local municipality in the state.
That's right.
Eliminating the administrator's update and comments from commissioners and suggesting during the meeting that an open-ended discussion is best handled outside the boardroom is a unilateral rejection of Ottawa Impact's contract with Ottawa and an encouragement on record to subvert the Open Meetings Act. Open Meetings ensures the right to provide meaningful comments during scheduled county commission meetings. Each published agenda provides instructions on how members of the commission and public can participate. Commission meetings and our comments are not free-for-all discussions, but neither are they one-sided affairs. It is our time to present, comment, make requests of staff, and proceed in an orderly fashion. Sadly, Commissioner Moss and his lockstep commission is silencing the elected voice of the people of Zeeland, Holland, Georgetown, Allendale, and Grand Haven just because he doesn't like what he might have to hear. End of quote.
That's right.
By the way, the next Board of Commissioners meeting is March 28th. This ought to be real interesting when that meeting happens.
Well, his summation there is so accurate. They don't want to face things that they can't explain, they can't cover for. They don't want to be caught off guard. You know, it's the same technique that we see with the book banning and the removal of Black history. The uncomfortable facets and historical events that they just can't fit into the rubric, they just want to dismiss. They just want to get rid of them. So we're not going to mix any New England town hall atmosphere of the citizens having a right to speak, and then you have to answer on your feet. No, they're not going to. That's too democratic. It's unbelievable. It does turn your stomach. I am not exaggerating. We used to talk about mustard and water, getting ready to throw up.
Yep.
Ottawa County board meetings, folks, it'll do it.
Yep. Forget the mustard and water. Just go to West Olive or wherever they have their Olive Township, wherever the commission meetings are. All right. Well, before we start talking about book bannings, let's go ahead and end this segment properly with the music and everything. Join us again soon for our next broadcast of As Ottawa County Turns. This program is produced by Hochter and Ramble.
That's creative, Darren.
Hochter and Ramble, our new sponsor here at Southpaws. Hocking up loogies is more like it when you're having to deal with Ottawa County. Oh, my God. All right, let's go ahead to our next stomach-churning topic. This is Janelle D. James writing for Bridge, Michigan. This is dated March 20th. This is an update on what's happening in Lapeer County, Michigan, with the book Gender Queer, a Memoir. The fate of an LGBTQ-themed library book that a prosecutor has said could prompt criminal charges is now in the hands of the local librarian, who is showing no sign of backing down from the fight. At a contentious public hearing last Thursday, most residents who spoke expressed support for keeping the book Gender Queer, a Memoir on library shelves. But several speakers, including notably County Prosecutor John Miller, said the graphic novel is inappropriate for children to access at a public library because it includes illustrations of sex acts. As Bridge, Michigan first reported early last week, Miller raised the prospect of filing criminal charges if the book is not removed, citing a state law that makes it a felony to entice a minor for immoral purposes. Miller has said repeatedly that his opposition to the book is not based on LGBTQ themes, but rather on the sex-related illustrations. Do you believe any of this, Jack?
No.
Definitely.
Put him on the show.
Put
him on as the stomach turns, because that's exactly. See, they have so many codes. I mean, when they say Soros, for example, they're saying Jewish, right? When they say Chicago, they're saying black. When they say inappropriate sexual descriptions, they're pointing right at the LGBTQ. That's, again, they can't stand up and face the music, so they wiggle around like a snake.
Yeah. Library Director Amy Churchill has steadfastly defended the book and the process the library followed before adding it to its collection. She said she believes one of the goals of the protesters is to pressure the library to not carry any LGBTQ content. But she said, quote, "Nothing will stop the Lapeer District Library from following the guidelines in its material selection policy and responding to patron requests in building a wide-ranging, diverse collection." End of quote. I'm proud of her. Good. Yeah. Under library policy, if anyone objects to the presence of a book, the challenge goes through a reconsideration process. As library director, Churchill has 75 days from the time a complaint is filed to review the material and make a decision. The first complaint was filed March 2nd, which means she must rule by May 16th. In the meantime, the book will remain available for checkout. Once she rules, any resident who is unsatisfied with her decision has 10 days to appeal to the library board. The board will then have 60 days to make a final decision on whether genderqueer will remain. Bridge reached out to board chair Gary Phillips on Friday and on Monday, but he said he was not available for comment before the story was published. Genderqueer has sparked controversy across the state and the nation and has been cited as the most banned book in America amid a movement by conservative parents, public officials, and activists to remove or restrict material from schools and libraries that deal with LGBTQ themes. The book tells the story of how the author came to terms as a teen with their sexual identity, the difficulties of coming out as non-binary to family and friends, and navigating issues of sexuality. Several community members spoke out at the library board hearing Thursday evening at the Lapeer Center building. The event was originally scheduled at the Lapeer Public Library, but was moved in anticipation of a large crowd. The board heard from parents, children, and residents at the 3-hour hearing. Most spoke in support of keeping the book, but a sizable minority objected. Susan Fernandez of Metamora Township said at the meeting, quote, "People who struggle with their sexual identity need and deserve literature that shows them that they are not alone. They belong in our books, they belong in our community, and they belong in our library." End of quote.
That's true. Yep, exactly.
But others criticized the book's presence. Truman Mast of Imlay Township said at the meeting, quote, "What are we doing exploiting innocent children's hearts and minds and using our taxpayers' dollars to do it? If you will not get rid of these ungodly books, then we, the people in this county, will make sure that the library millage is never renewed." End of quote. Oh, so they're threatening like Patmos.
Well, I remember Flip Wilson with the, dressed in drag clothes. It had no real influence on me. My sexual preference. To me, the whole idea that you can influence a child's inevitable sexuality, it's like taking a picture of a lilac bush and putting it in front of a seedling of an oak tree. The oak tree is going to grow up and be a lilac bush because of the influence of the book in front of it. It's laughable. I think scientifically, and I think it's been proven, we are who we are. What we develop into isn't because we were potty trained too early or whatever. It is it's inherent. It's indigenous. It's who we are as a human being. It's what we are. And it's not an easy process for some, and that book would have been an aid. You got to remember Stephen King. He said, "Hey, kids, if they ban a book in your school or in your library, run your ass to the nearest bookstore or another library and find out what it is they don't want you to know. There's something they don't want you to know, whether it's the content in To Kill a Mockingbird, which shows the bigotry and the racism in the South. That was, do I dare say, CRT. It was put into and instituted into the criminal system down there. They don't want that out. It's not because somebody's called an N-word in the book. It's that they don't want you to know there's a clear portrayal of the racism in that time period that existed and still exists in the South. And there's not a better example of it than that book. So that book is banned. And this book, I don't have to look at it to realize it has some things in there they don't want. History is not what you want it to be. It is what it was, and you have to portray it like a snapshot. You don't edit it. You don't play with it. You present it as it was, and our physicality, our sexual orientation, and all that, that's locked. That's not influenced. You don't make people gay any more than you change their eye color or their hair color.
Mm-hmm.
These Christians have this belief that you can actually change people's sexuality, by disowning them, by having families turn against them, by sending them to some brutal camp somewhere where it's supposedly beaten out of them with a holy stick.
Conversion therapy is what they call it.
Yeah. And the scientific proof and the experience and the historical precedence is that a sexual identity is there inherent in you from your first breath. It's not a ping pong back and forth. So the librarian up there, up north, I have to say I'm proud of her. You have some affiliation with her somehow. Darren, is that true?
Yes, I do. The financial manager for the Lapeer District Library is an old high school classmate of mine. As a matter of fact, her brother has been a previous guest on this show many years ago. So I might have to have Teresa on just to talk about this. Let me go ahead and continue the story here. Genderqueer is shelved in the adult section of the library, but anyone can access it. In an email, Churchill wrote, quote, "There are no physical restrictions to prevent anyone from accessing any part of the library. We do have an unattended child policy that requires direct adult supervision for anyone under the age of 10, and our material selection policy clearly identifies the parental authority to monitor their own child's reading material." End of quote. The library purchased the book last fall at the request of a patron. Shortly after, community members began objecting to it. One resident checked out the book and turned it in to the police, who then returned it back to the library the next day. This is how nutty they are, Jack.
Yeah.
In 2020, Genderqueer won the Alex Award from the American Library Association, which recognizes books that are published for adults but are of interest to readers ages 12 through 18. Prosecutor Miller told Bridge, Michigan last week he believed that the graphic novel's depiction of sex acts by seemingly young characters could violate Criminal Code 750.145A, a law that states that accosting, soliciting, or enticing a minor for an immoral reason is a felony. At the board hearing, however, Miller downplayed the potential for criminal charges and focused on the particulars of his objection to Genderqueer. During the hearing, he said, quote, "Let me be perfectly clear. I do not advocate banning books that involve LGBTQ content."
Wow.
However, books that encourage children to engage in sexual acts when they are not the legal age are not appropriate for a public library, end of quote. So there you go. Gotta love these people.
Yeah, the battle rages on, and I'm looking forward to confronting these knuckleheads. I've been to board rooms and fought with them. I'm in a group called Stop Moms for Liberty, who the head of that has made a commitment. The head of that group, called Stop Moms for Liberty, is committed to being in Mason and wanting to help us in any way possible.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah.
That's good. All right, let's get to some good news.
Really?
Yeah. This is Lauren Gibbons writing for Bridge, Michigan. This is dated March 21st out of Lansing. Michigan Democrats on Tuesday voted to repeal the state's right-to-work law and restore prevailing wage rates, targeting major Republican labor practices despised by unions. The bill package, House Bills 4004 and 4007 and Senate Bills 6 and 34, cleared both chambers Tuesday. The House voted through the Senate legislation in party line votes, and amended versions of the House bills were approved later Tuesday afternoon. The legislation now moves to Governor Gretchen Whitmer, a Democrat who has signaled she will sign the bills. Democrats pushed the bills through the legislature over protests from Republicans who contend the changes will make Michigan less competitive for employers. Here's my answer to that. When they tell you that they're going to make Michigan less competitive for employers, they are full of bullshit.
It's true. Yeah. That's not the only bullshit they're full of.
Yeah. They got quite a bit of it.
Well, Wood TV had an interview right after the bill of Whitmer's was inculcated, and they interviewed 3 business leaders of universities around Grand Rapids about this. And they all came out with, well, there's no real concrete data that shows that the wages are any higher in states that are not right to work, which is total bull. You talk about BS, total and complete bull. I called Wood TV. I said, listen, here you have the most consequential union legislation, at least in my memory, and you didn't find it possible to interview a union leader? Oh, well, maybe they tried, the person said it at Wood Radio.
Bullshit.
Go to the business world and you interview professors of business in conservative universities. You couldn't call the AFL-CIO. You couldn't call the steelworkers. You couldn't call a union. You couldn't call the MEA. I could get somebody in 3 minutes.
I can get Terry Hoogerhide from the Teamsters Union on the phone right now.
Hell yes.
Oh,
yeah.
Unbelievable.
They hemmed and hawed, didn't have an answer.
Yeah, because that's the agenda that Nexstar Media wants, because they want to run a scab shop too. Because guess what? The engineers at Wood TV, when I was working there in the late 80s and early 90s, were union. They were the only union employees in that entire building. And they didn't like that. Management didn't like that whatsoever. Yeah.
It's that clear.
Yeah.
So you don't even talk about them. You don't interview them. You don't talk about them. You talk about how there was no consequence of the legislation. Nothing. Either way, the guy said. If we have or don't have it, it doesn't have any bearing. Total crock.
Yep. Taken together, the legislation would end a 2012 law that prohibits compulsory union dues or fees and restore a construction industry prevailing wage law that the Republicans repealed in 2018. Supporters of the union-backed measures say it's a restoration of Michigan workers' rights and ensures they're getting fair wages. Representative Abraham Ayash, Democrat of Hamtramck, said on the House floor Tuesday, quote, "I don't understand why folks continue to get angry about the fact that we are trying to ensure that people in the state of Michigan can afford to live in the state." End of quote.
Yeah.
Business groups and Republicans say the repeal would make Michigan less competitive for employers and force workers to pay for representation some don't want. Well, that's the thing they don't tell you about right to work. It's also called right to freeload. Because if you work in a union shop and you don't pay union dues, the union still has to represent you, which I think that is horse shit.
It is.
You know, if you want to be represented, you either pay the dues or go work elsewhere. Bottom line. Conservative lawmakers argued right to work gave workers an important choice about whether to support a union. Yeah. Representative Tom Coons, Republican of Clare, said on the floor, quote, "Forced union membership is bad for individual workers and it's bad for business. This plan will only hurt Michigan."
Thank you, Mackinac Center.
Yeah, exactly.
It's been shown unequivocally that states that have right to work have the lowest income levels, wage levels, I should say, in the country. And it's not even disputed. It's not even close. And that's the bottom line. So you can research that like you can any social phenomena, and you'll find that the right to work has garnished lower wages, extremely lower. So they have more damn excuses that's come around in a circle at you. Did you see your dad's union have a positive influence on your family? I came from a union family. Without that backing, my mother would never have made the money, and my father that they did.
They did back in the 70s and 80s before they were stuck in the pockets of the goddamn Republicans. I'll just say it right here. When right to work was passed in 2012, it was because the head of the Michigan Carpenters Regional Council was a childhood friend of the Michigan House Speaker. And the speaker called him, and the direct quote that day was, "You're f***ed." Direct quote, reported by Crane's Business Detroit.
Yeah, didn't they do it at the middle of the night, too?
No, they did it right in broad daylight. There were hundreds, if not thousands, of people protesting out on the lawn. Deb Fragel was our special correspondent that day, trying to get interviews on the phone with people in the crowd.
Yeah.
It was unreal. Now, here's some even more good news about this. In passing the removal of right to work and the restoration of prevailing wage measures, Democrats used a procedural move that likely would prevent opponents from appealing it with a ballot initiative, because they added appropriations to the legislation to make it referendum-proof under the Michigan State Constitution.
Good move.
Yes, it is. And they've been criticized by Republicans, and some Democrats have criticized it. Oh, you're just giving the Republicans ammunition to do it to us later.
They'll do
you
it
mean
anyway.
Like they haven't done it before, right?
Yeah, they don't need any leading or impetus.
Yeah, unbelievable. And I was talking with the same friend that I mentioned at the beginning of the show. We were talking about how Democrats, liberals, just fold up their arms when Republicans screaming at them, well, we'll just see what happens, and we'll just let the process play out. And you wonder why conservatives call us wimps and p***s. This is exactly why. You need to get up in their face, you need to be confrontational, and you need to be mean to them, because that's the only language that they understand.
It's true. I have to say, the women that we have in the powerful positions in our government here in Michigan, Whitmer primarily, is just an amazing statement to the whole nation. They see her passing gun legislation that has been absolutely impossible for months to get anywhere near legislative discussion in any of these states. And she has got now legislation with background search, the provision that you cannot sell guns privately to your uncle and back and forth at school or wherever. She has done what they have not been able to do. As a retired teacher, she took the tax off of my pension, affecting thousands of Michigan teachers, retired teachers, amounting into millions of dollars coming into our pockets at this retired age in this inflation atmosphere. She got actual money and help to the middle class. Things that have been, can you imagine that's been sitting around since Snyder's days, that tax on pensions? A double tax, you might say.
And that's going away too, finally.
And that's going away too.
Finally. Let me continue the story here. In response, business groups are contemplating a ballot measure that would enshrine right to work in the state constitution, which, if passed, would circumvent the repeal. If somebody has one of these petitions out and they want you to sign it, get in their face and scream as loud as you can at them, scab. Just repeat the word scab.
Exactly. Yep.
Representative Regina Weiss, Democrat of Oak Park, said Democrats, quote, don't want a lot of outside interest to come in and try to push something through, end of quote. She added that if voters don't agree, they can elect new representatives in the next election. She said, quote, the hope is that folks in Michigan will see the benefits and that they will continue to endorse these choices moving into the future, end of quote. Getting the legislation over the finish line Tuesday required perfect attendance from Democrats, who hold a slim majority over Republicans in both chambers. Two representatives, Jason Hoskins of Southfield and Lori Stone of Warren, were cordoned off in the House gallery away from other lawmakers and members of the public due to illness, but still showed up for the votes. Hoskins had recently tested positive for COVID-19 with mild symptoms. That's according to spokesperson Amber McCann. It's not the first time this term Democratic lawmakers have voted from the gallery despite a COVID-19 diagnosis. Hoskins' presence in the chamber prompted criticism from House Republican leader Matt Hall, Republican of Richland Township, who said he, quote, can't help but feel as though the rules have changed to help pass controversial votes by slim margins, end of quote. No, you sons of bitches don't believe in COVID in the first place. You don't want a mask. You don't want a taken jab. F*** you guys. Really, seriously. I'm sick of these goddamn hypocrites. And I'm going to call them out every single time, and I'm going to be vulgar about it. And if you don't like it, you can turn the channel and don't listen to this program ever again. I don't care.
And for those who don't have a real clear picture of Union history, okay, when Darren referred to a scab, he's talking about a person. Well, Darren, you want to, there's a lot of definitions going on. We need to go back and look at the word woke. We got all kind. Remember we had our definition show. How do you define a scab? I have my definition. I want to hear yours first.
My definition of a scab is a non-union employee working on a union job. Bottom line.
Yeah. And the scabs that would go out with a petition that Darren mentioned and try to get you to sign, tell you that you're losing rights, you don't have the right not to join a union or whatever it is, they put a glowing ribbon on it, is a scab.
Yep.
Now, the strike in L.A., the teacher strike right now, there's a commitment from other teachers. There's teachers around that city. It's a big city. There's a lot of substitute teachers, et cetera. They've got a commitment. There will be no picket lines crossed. There'll be no scabs going in and teaching Johnny in the third grade. So the full impact of the strike is felt. All of the tactics the right wing has used to demote and drain the strength of unions, one of the biggest is breaking picket lines. And what you're talking about with having the petitions, that's a way of breaking the back and the stand of the union. You might as well go across a picket line. No scabs in L.A., No people running around as the summer gets here with petitions that you should look at to try to reinstitute right to work. Don't fall for it.
Yep. I'm going to skip around on this article a little bit here. Under the repeal legislation, workers who don't want to become union members would have to pay fees or leave their job if their union shop requires fee payment as a condition of employment. Beautiful. The repeal only applies to contracts with private sector employers such as automakers and manufacturers because a 2018 Supreme Court decision prohibits compulsory dues or fee payment for public employees, which that was a wrong decision by a conservative Supreme Court. I'm going to skip down a little bit more here. The state's former Republican-led legislature repealed the law in 2018 talking about prevailing wage after an expensive petition drive led by ABC Michigan, which represents non-union construction contractors across the state. Yeah, they're a trade group, the biggest bunch of goddamn scabs in the state of Michigan, besides the Mackinac Center.
Yep, Scab Center.
Yep. Oh, I got to stop, Jack, or I'm going to blow a gasket. I really
I understand. I understand. We mentioned woke a few minutes ago. I did.
Yep.
This whole conservative movement to attack progressivism under the moniker of woke is getting under my skin. You're talking about you're ready to blow a gasket. So I'm going to say this. The radio show, as long as I've been associated with it, called Southpaws, is proud to say we are woke. We're not perfect, but we're woke. We are woke to homophobia. We're woke to misogyny. We're woke to racism. We were woke to the fact that there were industrial schools for the Native Americans that were kidnapped right here in this state, clandestinely hidden for years. We're woke to the imperialism inflicted upon the rest of the world by the United States. We're woke to the corporate tie between both parties. We're woke in areas that will make a difference if you're awake in those areas. It is no insult to be called woke. I'm going to turn it around on them. I'm going to put a badge on my car, on my shirt, and a sticker on my car. I am woke. I'm proud of it. And those aren't our stupid, sleepy, fogged-over conservatives that have an ideologue that is the antithesis and in confrontation to progress. They've drugged their feet on all these issues. They use a tactic of hatred. They use a tactic of ignorance. They attack intellectualism. They attack science. They attack anybody who stands up and confronts them. They call them million. How many nicknames has Trump used to any opponent he's ever had? Any opponent, that is the way they work. I hope, Darren, that we can have a show sometime again and look into the maneuver. It's going to be the political term of this political season coming up to this upcoming presidential race, the word woke. I think we need to dissect it and look at it and stop it in its tracks before I punch my TV.
Yep. Basically, anything that conservatives don't like is woke.
Yeah.
That's the definition. If a conservative doesn't like it, then it's woke.
Yep. You want to talk about the atrocities, the black atrocities of cities like Tulsa? You're woke. You want to talk about the blacks that were taken and submitted to shots, given shots of syphilis so they could be studied, clandestinely given those shots? You want to talk about that? Then you're woke. Anything that really puts a spotlight on our DNA as a country that we could change and we can improve upon, that's woke.
Yep. And let's go back to the Los Angeles strike for a little bit here. I've got this story. This is Jocelyn Gecker and Colin Binkley writing for the Associated Press. This is dated March 22nd out of San Francisco. Bus drivers shuttle America's children to schools where cafeteria workers feed them and teachers' aides assist students who need the most help. And their pay is notoriously low. School support staffers earn on average about $25,000 a year in Los Angeles, barely enough to get by in one of the most expensive cities in America.
Yeah.
The pay is a driving factor behind a 3-day strike that has shut down the entire Los Angeles school system and put a spotlight on the paltry pay of support staff that services the backbone of schools nationwide. Why stop at 3 days? Let it run for 3 months.
Mm-hmm.
That's what you need to do, folks. Everybody needs to walk out and sit down and do nothing And let's see what happens to the rich in this country before we have to go and boil them and eat them.
$25,000 a year is gas money. Come on.
Is nothing.
That's absurd.
Yeah. Even outside pricey California, the school gigs often don't pay enough to live on. Arthur Anderson, a school worker in Virginia, says it's a shame it took a walkout to draw attention to the long-standing problem, but he hopes it helps. Anderson, a teacher's assistant in the Chesapeake public school system where he has worked for 30 years and makes $32,000 a year, said, quote, people are so frustrated, we all are, end of quote. This guy works 3 other part-time jobs to make ends meet. This is a teacher's assistant, 30 years experience.
Yep.
Quote, I struggle to pay my rent. I struggle to pay my bills. I love what I do. I just don't love what I get paid. End of quote. Anderson works 36 hours as a special education aide in his school's science department. But he is also asked to fill in as a bus driver and a custodian. When a science teacher is absent, he fills in as a substitute, which pays an extra $10 per class. Quote, I did that today. I got an extra $20. End of quote.
Yeah. Wow.
Oh, whoopee. $20.
These are the people that are with your kids all day long.
Yes.
These aren't money-grubbing capitalists that, trying to make money off of making you miserable. These are the workers with your children.
Yeah.
For more time during the day, probably than most parents are with their children.
Yep. I'm going to skip down a little bit here. A RAND survey of school leaders last year found that around 3/4 of school leaders say they are trying to hire more substitutes. 58% are trying to hire more bus drivers. 43% are trying to hire more tutors. In recent years, staff have also found themselves on the front lines of enforcing pandemic protocols or helping students struggle with their mental health or behavior. More than half of the nation's public schools started this school year feeling understaffed, with many struggling to fill key support staff jobs, especially in transportation and custodial work. That's according to a survey done by the U.S. Education Department. When asked about the biggest challenges, roughly 4 in 10 candidates felt the salary and benefits weren't good enough. I mean, this is just crazy. Unbelievable.
Yeah, I tell you, I give Chicago and LA cheers for showing the rest of the country how to strike.
Yep. All right. Well, I got to strike out at something.
Stop. Hammer time.
Oh, yeah, it's hammer time. It is time to drop the hammer on the douchebag of the week. This is a late winner, Jack. Michigan Republican Party Chair Christina Caramo
Oh, wow.
has put Michigan in the national and worldwide spotlight. I have this story. This is Charles P. Pierce, writing for Esquire magazine, of all places. Esquire talking about politics. This article is published March 23rd. We begin in Michigan. He sounds like he's getting ready to do his own soap opera. We begin in Michigan, where the state Republican Party has gone over the cliff and down a rabbit hole. New state Republican Chair Christina Caramo long ago took up residence deep in the Alpha Quadrant, and she now appears to be organizing a general Republican evacuation in that direction. The latest eruption has got Caramo and her party on the wrong side of the Holocaust. Here's how the Detroit News wrote about it. Democrats are advancing bills in the state legislature this month to expand background check requirements for firearm purchases and mandate the safe storage of guns in homes where children are present. The package of proposed laws also would allow for extreme risk protection orders, permitting a court to temporarily remove weapons from someone's home if they are deemed a threat to themselves or others. What they call red flag laws.
Yeah.
Here with its response is the Michigan Republican Party. Again, this is according to the Detroit News, which is a conservative-leaning newspaper.
Mm-hmm.
But on Facebook and Twitter Wednesday morning, the Michigan Republican Party shared a meme that said, quote, before they collected all these wedding rings, they collected all the guns, end of quote. The text was displayed on a 1945 photograph of wedding rings that were taken by Germans from Holocaust victims, according to the U.S. National Archives. Lovely, isn't it, Jack?
Wow. Yeah. What an idiot. What a flaming idiot.
Yeah. The Detroit News helpfully points out that in addition to being completely insane, the analogy fails historically as well. The Detroit News published this. The German Nazi regime banned Jews from owning guns and disarmed them as part of rules adopted in 1938 that loosened firearms restrictions for other German residents that had prevailed since the end of World War I. That is according to Bernhard Harcourt, a Columbia University law professor. The German rules targeted a religious ethnic group without any judicial process as they gave gun rights to other citizens, while the Michigan Democratic legislation takes away guns from individuals based on threatening behavior and is overseen by judges.
Wow.
Again,
Wow.
that's according to the Detroit News.
Yeah, well, hey, the conservatives in the South, not that many years ago, they were all for banning guns. They banned them for blacks. Only white people could have guns. So it's not like they've never had book banning.
Yeah.
Or gun banning, excuse me.
Yeah. But this elides the simple fact that the Michigan Republican Party is being led by a crazy person and that the party is following right along behind her.
Those are your words, right?
That's the words of Esquire magazine.
Okay, yeah. Well, they got it. They nailed it.
From New York Magazine, it says, in addition to her stolen election claims, she's said Antifa was behind the Capitol riot, has promoted the Clinton kill list conspiracy theory and various alleged plots involving George Soros, and often cites demonic influence as the reason for the country's ills. Last year, the liberal watchdog Media Matters highlighted comments Karamo made in 2020 as a podcast host, detailing how Beyonce, Ariana Grande, Cardi B, and Billie Eilish were promoting paganism and acting as tools of Satan. She also alleged Jay-Z was a Satanist, though she also acknowledged that she lacked hard proof for that claim.
Yeah.
She said yoga was a satanic ritual and called out a Korean dramedy for a plotline in which a character was communicating with demons.
Yeah, and JFK Jr. is going to appear any minute in the Lansing Capitol. But here's the thing. They twin to this woman, whose name is Gibbs. Am I not mistaken? Wasn't the other candidate, conservative candidate for governor, John Gibbs?
John Gibbs ran for Congress.
For Congress. That yo-yo, what's his position with Ottawa County?
He's the administrator of Ottawa County. And by the way, they just hired a brand new assistant for him because he can't do the job by himself. Wow. So they had to raise the pay of the assistant to the administrator by $40,000 because he can't do it.
His bag of marbles is half full. You know it. I know it. The state of Michigan knew it when they voted him down, and he pops up in Ottawa County. Wow.
Yep. So to Christina Karamo, we have this message for you.
Don't be a douchebag.
Oh, yeah, you got that right. Listen up, honey. You need to shut your cake slot. Actually, no, you don't. Keep repeating all the ignorant anti-Semitic stuff that you can. Please keep repeating it because I want people in this state to remember this every single election from this day forward, that the entire Republican Party is nothing but an assorted bowl of fruits and nuts.
It's true. You feel better, Darren, or worse?
In some ways, I feel better. In some ways, I feel even worse. I don't know.
Hey, it has to be said.
Yeah. Well, Jack, that's going to wrap things up for this week. We will be back next week. I'm Darren Gibson.
Right, Jack Prince.
Please support independent media, the First Amendment, and a woman's right to choose.
The stations that carry Southpaws do not necessarily share the opinions expressed on the show. Southpaws is protected by the First Amendment to the U.S. Constitution and is copyrighted by Big D Entertainment. All rights reserved.